Everyone, my name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I am very honored and excited to be interviewing a very special space champion, Miss Lori Garver. Miss Garver is an operating advisor at Bessemer Venture Partners, a senior fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, and a member of the board of directors of Hydrosat. She founded the Earthrise Alliance in 2019, a philanthropic initiative dedicated to utilizing satellite data to address climate change. She previously was the former Deputy Administrator of NASA and Executive Director of the National Space Society. Ms. Garver is also the co-founder of the Brooke Owens Fellowship, has served on the board of directors of Maxar Technologies, and is a former president of Women in Aerospace and the American Aeronautical Society. I heard Ms. Garver speak at ISDC 2022 at Washington, D.C., and was inspired by her incredible accomplishments in the aerospace industry. I'm so excited to hear today what inspired Ms. Garver and how she got into where she is today. So welcome. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation.
Well, thank you for having me, Gitika. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, before we get into diving into your journey a little bit further, could you first start off by sharing a little bit about your typical day? I know usually there isn't a typical day, but how does your day usually run?
Yeah, these days there is less of a typical day than in some of my previous careers. Of course, COVID keeps me attached to Zoom like this a lot and other video platforms. I do spend quite a bit of time these days on interviews. I just, in fact, got off a live radio interview with KOA Denver and have a few more this afternoon. But I also try to get in some exercise. My friend who just lives a couple blocks away and I like to start off our days with an early morning walk. I live 6 blocks from the capital of the United States, and it is just a beautiful walk. And I have a dog. So that is my life. My husband works out of the home. He works for Lockheed Martin. And when he gets home in the evenings, we will typically take another walk with the dog and be able to enjoy a dinner on our patio. That is a great day for me, although I've started traveling again. So that routine is disrupted, but disrupted is not always a bad thing. I'm enjoying getting back out to see the world and people in it.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that you're able to still balance kind of the healthy lifestyle while also doing so many different things and activities in your daily schedule. And, you just responded off of my LinkedIn message. So, thank you for that. I'm so excited to talk with you. But obviously, like the other interviews you do, I've watched a few and they're just absolutely incredible. And I have to start off with asking the question of what was the inspiration behind founding Earthrise Alliance? And, I was reading about the organization and to see something, like a company working on using aerospace as a vehicle to really improve our planet is I think one of the biggest purposes of the aerospace industry. So could you share a little bit about the organization, the work you do, and the inspiration behind founding it?
Yes, well, the inspiration is very much, as you just said, one of the things that compels me, and especially even in the early days, about supporting space development activities is that the unique perspective we have from space on planet Earth has helped millions of people, billions of people, and has the potential to address one of, I believe, is the world's greatest challenges today, and that is our changing climate. Having been in the position of NASA administrator, I've had the opportunity to meet the people who are driving these technologies, and some of those people who had previously worked either in the government at NASA or at the Science and Technology Policy Office. And I got together to found Earthrise in order to make sure that the data that we are already getting from space, from satellites primarily, is fully utilized to address the climate crisis. That means certainly helping to adapt to what has already happened and to alleviate human suffering, being able to translate the bits of information to actual knowledge about where there will be drought and so forth is very important. But we're also looking at strategies to use that data to mitigate future climate change. And our exciting project now is we've developed a coalition called Climate Trace, and it helps map greenhouse gas emissions real time. And we're able to get that information to like Envoy John Kerry, our climate envoy, who's using them in his discussions and negotiations globally to show that you really can't hide this information anymore. And if we are going to successfully be able to enforce treaties, put in place any sort of greenhouse gas emissions, monetary tax policy and so forth related to carbon emissions, we're going to need that verification information. So it's been a labor of love, really. It's a nonprofit project, and I had funding for 3 years to do this, and I did it. That is over that funding, but of course it is still my passion, and the team is continuing because there's plenty of people who will pay for this information. So I really was happy to be able to bring it together. That's sort of what I do. I'm a big picture person. I like to see how we can strategically make changes that will help humanity in the future. And that's what space does. And Earthrise was able to, and every day is working to make that a reality for not just the people who are going to space, but for the 7 billion plus of us here on terra firma.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, just hearing you talk about it, I can really see your love and passion for Earthrise Alliance. And I think their initiatives like these are what is going to help us understand our planet better and come up with, what are the next steps to improve our planet, not just go beyond. Of course, that's a great way to continue advancing our technology, but also bringing that technology back here on Earth. And that's something that excites me personally about, space medicine as well. It's using the data we already are collecting on so many experiments that are being sent to space, and trying to analyze all those genes, trying to analyze what we can figure out about the human body to help treat conditions on Earth. And so I think it all comes back to trying to help the people. So thank you for that. And I also read how you were the co-founder of Brooke Owens Fellowship. And as an aspiring individual who wants to go into the aerospace industry, and as a female, when I heard about this fellowship experience, I was just mind blown at the opportunities that it provides for girls to connect with mentors and really just propel into their careers. So could you share a little bit about the inspiration again for founding Brooke Owens Fellowship?
One of the things about having the career I have had is a unique opportunity it gives you to mentor and to serve as a role model. And I think as women, we tend to not focus on that enough because we want to maybe fit in or, focus on our own careers. And I mentored an early career woman named Brooke Owens during my career, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer on her 30th birthday. She survived 6 years. It was a very difficult, challenging time, but she persevered. And the day she died, I actually just could not handle her light, not continuing to shine. She was one of those people who believed in how the value of working in space could help all of us. And I sent an email to about 20 friends and colleagues saying, how about if we started I don't think I called it a fellowship, an internship program where we got collegiate women jobs, paid jobs, because they need to understand what we do in this industry. People are always saying, oh, we couldn't hire enough women don't apply. Well, guess what? We have over 1,000 applicants every summer now for these paid internships. We have a mentorship program, and we bring them all together for a big summit. So it creates this cohort. And now 6 years into the program, we are a force of new ideas and innovations in the industry the companies, our host companies, have really stepped up and are hiring not only for the internships, but these interns are really very highly sought after when they graduate. We started another program called the Patty Grace Smith Fellowship. A fellow colleague, a Black woman who was really important in commercial space, died around the same time as Brooke. So Brooke Owens Fellowship is for women and gender minorities, and the Patty Grace Smith Fellowship is for Black students. And we now have nearly 100 every year students entering the field, bringing their new ideas. And it has, as I say in the book I just wrote that we'll talk about soon, I've accomplished a lot in my career, but there's no way that I could ever accomplish more than developing a cohort of people who will follow. Each ripple in the pond expands outward, and it's been a true joy of my life. At first it was hard because missing Brooke, each of these young women is very Brooke-like, but and we've joked, wouldn't like her name probably being on this. She was not that kind of person, but her story has resonated with people. And as I have said before, she and I talked about the importance of bringing more diverse thoughts, ideas, people, perspectives into the field. And she and I were both wired to do more than just talk.
That's, absolutely incredible. I think just, a lot of times I always get asked the question of, do you think the aerospace industry is, getting better? Is there are we starting to bridge that gap or break those glass ceilings? And every time I get that question, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Brooke Owens Fellowship or other similar fellowships, because these are programs that are breaking the glass ceiling for a lot of minorities, whether it be like ethnicity, gender identification, really even socioeconomic status, because students are able to get these incredible opportunities right in college, and get first experience of what it's like to work in an aerospace career. And I think it's absolutely amazing what you've started, and I think Brooke would be very proud, and every single one of these girls carries a piece of her with them in their future. So I think that's very meaningful. When I actually heard about this program, I didn't know about Brooke, so I thank you for sharing that story.
Well, it's also energized the community. My fellow colleagues, people of my generation, are moved by the interest. So it's given back. It's just more than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, some of my most amazing people that I follow on Twitter are all Brooke Owens fellows, like Miss Harriet Hunt, or there's just so many I could name. They're all so cool. And I, also during ISDC, I was listening to your talk, and I realized, very quickly that you were a core part of the aerospace industry as we transitioned from a very government agency regulated, program to something a lot more commercial with more privatization through companies like SpaceX. And so during this process, was there opposition, which I'm pretty sure there was, but I'd love to hear that from you. And if there was, as a part of the NASA's senior leadership team, how are you able to kind of set aside the political aspects of this and focus on advancing space and advancing STEM?
Well, throughout my now more than 35-year career in the space program, the private sector has always played an important role. In this country, the government doesn't just do this stuff themselves. Part of our role is to drive technologies further, and in NASA's case, to allow the aerospace industry to partner with them. And when I was at NASA in the 1990s, the NASA administrator I worked for, who was there over 10 years working for 3 different presidents, was always very focused on the next vehicle to replace the space shuttle would be owned and operated by industry, not by the government. Government is not great at sort of owning and operating stuff and innovating. And there's a lot of very valid reasons for that. We're supposed to drive down, risks and advance technology and new knowledge. So when I came back to NASA in 2008 on the transition team for the Obama incoming administration, the shuttle was set to be retired in 2010, and the follow-on program was very far off track, over budget, and had been structured to be owned and operated by the government. And that was one of the reasons it was not being successful. So driving this policy with the new president was a priority, because I knew, again, from a very long career, lowering the cost, increasing the accessibility of space to more people, more spacecraft, more thoughts, more ideas is what's going to really make the big difference. And so lowering that bar was critical, and starting a program that commercialized our ability to get astronauts into space was a way you could sort of leverage the government's investment, lower the cost so that the government could spend its money, taxpayers' money, actually doing the things that were of higher value and unique to a public good, not something that could be marketed to others. We have already been launching satellites for 50 years. So having the private sector do that in new ways that allows them to lower the costs would not only benefit the government, but our economy. That was really the inspiration for it. And given how strongly I felt about that important policy change, and how I had learned it from people much, much smarter than me decades before, that gave me the stamina really to stand up to the people who didn't agree with the change. They didn't want to change. And those were people who are not bad people. They just were incentivized to keep doing things the way we're doing. That's human nature. And many of these were working in companies where that was how their contracts were structured. They didn't want competition. They didn't want to have to try to lower the cost to do something they were getting more and more money to do the longer time it took them to do it. That's really the responsibility of the government. And I took it really seriously when I stood up and took the oath to work on behalf of the president and the American people, and was very clear about how we owed a better space program to the public. This was just one of the ways that I was able to make a change that I think now is widely seen as positive.
Yeah, I know the commercialization aspect of the aerospace industry truly just, I think, revolutionized how we view the industry as a whole today, from the accessibility standpoint, as you were mentioning, and the way that it adds to the economy, and how we're starting to view space as something that we can do with more people. The job market's increasing. More individuals who don't necessarily need to have government approval to work can now work in private companies and still innovate, explore, and create. And I think all those accessibility points to not only just go to space but to work in this incredible realm is just amazing. And I noticed, I was reading about a little bit about your book, and noticed how you captured many of these moments in your new book, Escaping Gravity. So could you talk a little bit more about this book, and I guess how it went, going around writing this book, and how you found the inspiration for writing one?
Yes, I'm not sure that I thought as much about this when I was in my career as when I was leaving NASA, and other journalists wanted my notes to be able to tell this story. I started recognizing I had some insight uniquely into a part of history that was not well known and was very important. I feel like in my grandparents' day, they saw flight for the first time, which had to have been incredible. And I got to see people walking on the moon. We have been stalled for a while, and recognizing what I was able to help bring about because of the coming together of a lot of things, technology, the private capital, as well as the policies we drove, were allowing us to transform into this next space age, as I say in the title of the book, was unique. And I had kept my notes. I was not really focused on it beyond writing a few outlines until COVID, when I found I had extra time on my hands from not commuting, from not traveling, things I missed, and wanted to put my time to good use. I was able, it is a memoir. I was able to get a publisher fairly early in the process who helped shape the narrative, and it just came out a couple weeks ago. I think for me, the inspiration was that what we do in space is important. As we've been saying, it's a greater value than we usually share. I talk to people all the time, not in the field, who don't understand certainly why we're spending so much money sending a handful of people to space. And in some sense, I think they are correct to question that, since we've been doing it for so long. So lowering the cost is what will allow us to really put more innovative solutions together. And I don't think it's just for NASA that we've been held back by these sort of cost plus contracts that I describe in the book. Our military program, a lot of the acquisitions the government makes are focused on sort of solving problems of the past. And that's just because our cycle in government rewards those who are already doing it. You know, it's a sort of bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. If you've got a big contract, you're going to work like mad to keep it. And therefore, that's going to stifle advancement to do the next thing. So I worked pretty hard to break that cycle. It was not popular. It was not popular for a lot of reasons. One of them likely being because I didn't look like everyone else. I didn't even have the background like everyone else. I don't have engineering background, but political science and economics. But for me, that gave me a unique perspective to what we're doing, not unlike the unique perspective we get in space. You know, we measure a lot of things from the ground, but it's not until you go to space that you get that big picture. And that is what is truly transformative for humanity and for our future. And so it was, I took a lot of negative reaction. I mean, I say in the book, my patriotism was questioned, and people told me and said it publicly in congressional hearings that what I was trying to do was going to ruin the space program. So you can imagine, when I knew at the time, I felt very strongly the opposite was the case. The programs they were protecting had led to a stagnant program. So of course, wanting to write about it is pretty natural. I really feel like we can learn from this example, and we shouldn't close out ourselves to new ideas. We should be open. We should want different perspectives and value them. And that's why I wrote the book.
Wow, I am so excited to get my hands on the book and really just dive into it, because just hearing you talk about these different pieces, and also your unique background in not like a typical STEM major, is something that I would love to kind of dive deeper into, because a lot of, the interviews that I do are focused around what got you into space. And so kind of coming, I know space is so interdisciplinary. Like, I think it's like its own little world. You can literally combine any career and put space with it. And I'm sure it exists. So could you talk a little bit about what inspired you to get into aerospace and how you kind of maneuvered, a little bit about your journey?
Yes, my path was not typical because I didn't grow up wanting to be an astronaut. I didn't see astronauts as people like me. Sally Ride, our first American female astronaut, launched the year I graduated from college. I was deterred from going into science and math in high school, typical 70s kind of stuff that I outline in the book. But I fell into the program because I worked for John Glenn on his campaign for the presidency. And I worked on his campaign because, although I grew up as a Republican in a fairly political family, by then in college, I had traveled. I went on a program called Semester at Sea. One of the countries I was in was India. And something happened there that caused me to really question what the US was doing in our policies. A woman on a bus who was holding a beautiful baby that I was smiling at, and the baby was smiling at me, tried to hand me the baby. And we were told women did this and then jumped off the bus knowing that their baby would have a better life when they saw an American there who would take responsibility. And to me, right then, we were cutting back on foreign aid. We were focused on, more like fueling anti-communist leaders than caring about humanity. And I just couldn't imagine having a situation where you would give up your child to have a better life. Things are not right if that's happening in the world. And I was your age.
Yeah.
I was your age, and came back and decided, I was a political science and economics major, that I wanted to work for someone who could beat Reagan and change those policies. I mean, it had nothing to do with space. So I'm working for John Glenn on his presidential campaign.
Wow.
He didn't win in the primaries, but because of that, I had people who had worked with him, looked out for the young, early career people, and helped get me a job at the National Space Society. I ended up staying there for 13 years, but I started as a receptionist, bookkeeper, secretary. And I think 3 or 4 years in, became the executive director. While I was working full-time, I got a master's at night in science, technology, and public policy, because I just believed that what we were doing in space should be better utilized to help us all. And that just seemed like the most interesting thing in the 1980s that we could do. And after working at the National Space Site for 13 years, I had been testifying on the Hill to advance these concepts. And the head of NASA called me up and asked me to come work at NASA. That was my first NASA job. I had only gotten to know him through things like I become president of Women in Aerospace, volunteering, really the kinds of things that I recommend to early career people. And it worked for me. And I ended up, being able to have a career that has been what I care most about, has been meaningful.
Wow, yeah, I'm simply, I guess, like speechless at your hard work and your dedication you must have really done over those past 15, 20 years, really at the start of your career, because I can't imagine kind of switching up, based off your interest and your passion. You really followed through, and you kept going and you kept pushing and putting yourself out there, which is definitely a lesson that everyone, I think, should take to heart, because it really shows that passion can go far, like if you keep sticking with it. And I think your story really speaks to it. And yeah, that's incredible. That's amazing. And on this journey, I'm sure you had obstacles, and you kind of shared a little bit, a few of them, and how you stayed strong, and you kept believing in what you thought was right, and you stuck with it. And so what advice would you give for young students who might be in a similar position, and to help them kind of feel more confident to stick with their beliefs and to stick with their passion?
Well, passion is one of those words that we use a lot in this regard. For me, that means doing something that you get up every day excited to address. And I have children. I, have had this wonderful marriage for 36 years. And of course, when you're working, that takes time from those things. So you better make sure that what you're doing is meaningful. And for me, having your family recognize that really helped. One of the inspirations, of course, being to leave the world better than you found it. When you have children, it's not just for them. It's always interesting to me. People say, well, I'm for this. I have kids. Like, well, okay. Even if I didn't have kids, I'd be for it. That's sort of, I think, an innate human interest. Yeah. And overcoming the kinds of things that really you are doing already, the things that I would have suggested. Put yourself out there. I have a saying that I have given to the Brookies. Usually it's part of a rap that I will not perform for you, but one of the lines typically in my rap, because Brooke did spoken word, so I like to just make everyone suffer through me trying to do that, is no one knows how to do a job before they do it. So just act like a dude and push right through it. We are known as women for having, the imposter syndrome, as we refer to it. I didn't know how to do the jobs before I did them. You go to work every day, you keep everything in front of you and learn, and you speak up when you need to know something, and that will get you through every day. And you can take on more than you think you can. And the discussion we've been having about bringing your own background, interests, and perspective to new roles is important. As a social science major, I realize no one knows everything. Innovation is the coming together of different ideas. That's through collaboration. And so being open to that, and those of you who have engineering and science backgrounds are very important to this, but so are people who bring a broad perspective.
Definitely. And, one thing that I love to think about is, everybody grows up with like a different background, different culture. You grow up with different, political backgrounds, families, ideologies. But I think when you come in a room and you bring in these different backgrounds, then you can literally solve any problem. And so definitely having that representation and having that diversity in every room, and to bring in your own, not just differences and how you may outwardly look, but also how you were growing up. Sometimes, when I talk with students who grew up in a different state than I, Virginia versus maybe California, or even just another rural state, I can see the differences in thought process. But I think that's what makes it beautiful, because then when you come up with a problem, everybody has a different way of approaching it. So yeah, definitely. And with your experiences and your journey and the incredible advice you gave, my last and final question for you is, from your expertise in the aerospace industry and your experience, what are you most nervous about for the future of the industry, and what are you excited about?
All right. I really feel like I'm nervous that we have not yet fully learned these lessons about change being positive. And right now, NASA is continuing to spend several $billion a year on programs, the old style of doing it, that is SLS and Orion. They've been 12 years in the making, and part of the book talks about how they came about when we were hoping to do things in a new way. And I'm concerned that as we see those programs continue, it's going to be increasingly challenging for the community to let go. And I'm sorry that we're going to have to go through that. It seems obvious that we are, because those programs are not going to be sustainable, but thousands of people work on them, and they are good people, and they want to do things that contribute toward a better future. So on the flip side of that, what I'm most excited about is that with the now lower cost to get to orbit, you really are now at a point where we have the tools, the knowledge to solve today's problems, and we can do that from that perspective. Escaping gravity, I say, isn't about just escaping the Earth's gravity, but the gravity of our situation. We live in a time, thankfully, when we have the ability to overcome this. I'm sad that our generation, my generation, is leaving yours with so much to address, but we at least have given you some tools, and the space programs are going to offer some of that for you. Of course, I'm also excited about people living and working in space and beyond. I'm pretty focused today on doing that in a way that allows us all, allows humanity to survive. As I think we know inherently, we often say exploration, we're an exploring species. Well, guess why? Because we must explore to survive. And if you look at the evolving nature of life, that's what it's about. And space is another step, and we should do it in a way that keeps that at the forefront.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's always so important. And it's so nice to hear, first off, from your experience, what you're really looking forward to in the future, and just to keep all of those in mind. And as someone who's coming into the industry, I'm so excited to see how much will change in the next 10, 20 years, because I think just going back to, 2000s, early 2000s, seeing how much we've changed and just reading about the change is just mind blowing. So just imagining what's going to happen for the next 10, 20 years, it's just unimaginable. So I'm very, very excited. So, thank you so
You
much.
are the generation to create it. So I am thrilled so many people like you are excited.
Thank you. And thank you for your time today. I have literally had a great time talking with you. I probably could spend hours talking and hearing about your journey. It was incredibly inspirational. And I'm sure every student, every girl who's listening to this will take your advice and your journey to heart. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.